the Right to Food and Work campaign had to work very hard to make this a people's issue, because as everybody has been pointing out since the morning, public awareness about laws that are being framed are very poor. And even when you put it out on a website, you get hardly any responses. So how did this law get passed when there is so much dearth of public knowledge and information about the laws being placed in Parliament? Now, the Right to Food and Work campaign, they took out a yatra called the Rozgar Yatra, Rozgar Adhikar Yatra, through 7 states, the most backward districts, the most backward states of the country. Beginning from Delhi, they went to UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, and all those what we call Bimaro states. Over 100 days, they took a Rath Yatra, not the kind of Rath Yatra which divides and causes conflicts in our society, but a really unifying yatra, a Rath Yatra, that was able to bring these issues to the forefront, to mobilize people's support for this act, and to inform the villagers that this law has to come. That is the only way you will get employment. So it was the pressure built up by this yatra that went through the most backward states and mobilized common people there, that they could mobilize all these people, thousands and thousands of them, to come to Delhi and demonstrate before Parliament House. In fact, on Parliament Street, they did a very innovative thing, You need to catch the common man's attention. You can't do that with legal jargon. You can't say, this is the law, this is what it says. So they simplified it, and on Parliament Street, when the Parliament was debating this bill, they got activists from every district in the country, every single district in the country, to bring one sari with signatures of the common people supporting this bill. And these saris were tied together and they fluttered along Parliament Street. It created a movement in the whole country, mobilizing citizens and ensured their participation in supporting this act and bill. So that's how we got this. Now, the same thing happened to the Right to Information law also. Now, how could a law which actually trampled on the secrecy of the state, even though we were supposed to be an independent country, the Official Secrets Act was ruling this country for 6 decades or almost 6 decades. And if you went to a government office, you were told, we cannot show you this file, this is secret, this is government property, and common citizens have no access to these documents. So you came away crestfallen, you would not get any information about your own applications and your own rights. But what a momentous thing this Right to Information law is, because it throws open every single file in the government office and weakens the power of the legislators as well as the bureaucrats who thought they are the rulers of this country. Now the power has shifted to the citizens, because this act puts back or makes the citizen the sovereign, who is the holder of all the rights, and it puts the legislators and the bureaucracy in the proper role of servants of the citizens, and that the citizens are supreme and sovereign, and that they have a right to know and to demand their to demand the accounts from the bureaucracy, which is paid through the taxpayers' money. So this was a momentous change in the power structure, and this also came through by the struggle that Aruna Roy initiated in Rajasthan for right to information. And it became a national act again, because they drafted various drafts of this law, took it to different parts of the country, involved civil society groups everywhere to debate it, to debate every clause, to give recommendations, to revise it again and again, to refine it. And there was total citizen participation in the framing of these laws. And that was again a momentous one. Then now you know that uh, now again, Narmada Bachao Andolan has been fighting. For 20 years they have been saying, that your policies are displacing the poor. It is not really development what you are doing. And the dam, we are not anti-development. We are for development, but development for whom? And that the Narmada Bachao Andolan has been uh, fighting a campaign which is changing the very paradigm of the discourse on development. They have contributed so much to that that today, only now after 20 years, people are beginning to recognize that there is some truth in what they are saying, that you cannot displace and, people from their livelihood, from their forest, from their ancestral land, indiscriminately in the name of development, and throw them out of their livelihood without proper resettlement and rehabilitation. Now, everybody thinks Medha Patkar is a mad woman who is opposing development. It is not at all correct. She is actually very much for development of the people who are really deprived, and she is asking for proper development to take place. And even though her struggle is 20 years old, and they have tried to bring attention to the injustice in this whole mega development projects by even doing, by going on various satyagrahas and even courting Jal Samadhi. When the waters of the Narmada were rising, she was there standing and prepared to be immersed in the rivers along with all the people who are going to be displaced. Even that act did not move the government to relook at their dam or their big development projects. And even though the World Bank also withdrew from this project, the government did not act, and the raising of the height of the dam has gone on continuously. But it is amazing that right now, because of the campaigns against the special economic zone, which is also doing similar things, because of Nandigram and even Nandagudi in Bangalore, attention has come and people are realizing that the poor also have a stake in this country. They have a right to livelihood. They have a right to development. So now there is talk of bringing in a policy on resettlement and rehabilitation. Now, how did this policy come about? It's only through the efforts of civil society groups like the Narmada Bachao Andolan and the anti-SEZ campaigns. That is the National Alliance of People's Movements, which Medha Patkar is also heading. So we have brought in a whole change in the discourse on development, and for that we have to thank civil society. And recently, last week or this week itself, you would have seen on NDTV also taking up these issues, and there was a Janadesh, a yatra that covered 100 kilometers. Now 28,000 people have walked from Gwalior to Delhi last week, or from October 2nd, they started on their yatra and reached Delhi last week or so, demanding what? Demanding proper land reforms, which have never happened in this country. So it is all linked to this resettlement, displacement, rehabilitation, but also in the very distribution of the productive assets of this country. Land reforms has become a dead issue, though it was a very relevant issue at the time of independence. And this Janadesh or this yatra for land reforms has been led by the Ekta Parishad, headed by Mr. Rajgopal, and suddenly land is again on the agenda of the country. That concentration of land because of SEZs and all other such measures is not the way to develop, and that people have a right to own land and live peacefully on it and maintain their livelihood. It has been put on the national agenda because of people like Mr. Rajgopal and the Ekta Parishad. So you can see that the most basic issues of the country that we needed to concentrate on, food, employment, land, those have been spearheaded by civil society. Now there is also a campaign against water privatization. Now water is a big issue all over the country. You know that the next war is going to be fought on water and not on anything else. So water has become such a scarce resource, and now the multinationals are eyeing, the international financial institutions are eyeing water as a commodity from which money can be made, because now it has become a scarce resource. So now it is civil society which is leading the campaign against the attempt by the World Bank and others to privatize water distribution and even the ownership of water. Now, I'm sure all of you have heard of Parivartan and what happened in the Delhi Jal Board. It is a significant case that has been won by the exercise of the right to information. Now, this is the biggest achievement what right to information has achieved. Through right to information, Parivartan and its leader, Mr. Arvind Kejriwal, who is also a Magsaysay award winner, he was able to access all the documents of the World Bank and the correspondence that had gone between World Bank and Delhi Jal Board, and he was able to disclose how the World Bank was trying to twist the arm of the Delhi Jal Board to give the contract for water privatization to a particular company, PricewaterhouseCoopers, which was the choice of the World Bank. And because of the struggle of Parivartan and this whole project, the project details were made open through the right to information, and it was shown how by privatizing operations and maintenance of the water supply in Delhi, consultants would have earned much more than the whole budget of the Delhi Jal Board. And that, you know, finally it was a scheme for benefiting the multinationals and not so much for giving water to the citizens of Delhi. So all this has been, and even in Bangalore now there is a campaign against privatizing the BWSSB and the water supply in Bangalore. All this is being led by the civil society. And I am sure now, and it was through the efforts of the campaign against water privatization in Bangalore that a policy was drafted to secure the rights of the poor to some free water. Otherwise, all poor would also have to pay huge user charges which they could not afford. So a policy and that should lead to an act also on protecting water to a fundamental right to water for the poor. Okay, then I think I've taken a lot of time. Okay, I'll just like to conclude by saying that very often, sometimes civil society participation can also go wrong if the proper process of public consultation is not followed. Now, we are all familiar with the Child Labor Act. It was passed in 1986. It is totally unconstitutional because it recognizes that children can work in certain non-hazardous sectors and that children need not work only in certain hazardous sectors. Now, how did this whole act come there? It was because a particular NGO was also a representative of civil society. It was asked to draft this law, and this law was drafted without any broader public consultation, without going to the masses, without getting their opinions. And having been framed by a single organization, it has taken the child labor movement back by 20 years because it has not recognized the fundamental right of a child to education and the fundamental right of the child to be free from having to labor. Now, we do not want such civil society participation. Also now, there is a move in the urban areas to bring in a law called the Community Participation Law. Now, this also has been framed by a single person, also a representative of civil society, and it has been adopted by the central government through all kinds of lobbying, and it is being imposed on the states now. And without the state legislature knowing what is the content of this law or anything like that. Now, definitely we should not promote this kind of civil society participation. So, I would like to point out one more success in Karnataka of the Karnataka Panchayat Raj Amendment Act. All of you may be knowing, recently there was a move by the legislators of Karnataka to usurp the powers of the Panchayat Raj by saying that MLAs will decide who shall be the beneficiaries of various schemes. But because of civil society movements who have been training Panchayat Raj institution representatives on their powers and on the right of the local government to exercise, on the right of local self-government institutions to have retain their powers over what happens in their areas. The grassroots level panchayat leaders have risen in revolt against this Amendment Act, and they have come to Bangalore, staged demonstrations, and they have ensured that the bill is passed back by the governor. Now, this is also a major achievement of civil society in Karnataka, that by mobilizing the Panchayat Raj leaders, they were able to get this act stopped. So I can go on with many more examples, but I think one important thing that I've forgotten is about the process by which this social security law for the unorganized sector is being debated right now. And despite several drafts of the social security law being framed by several civil society groups, we have still not succeeded. This is one area where civil society has really failed, that a law which was going to provide social security to 90% or 92% of the unorganized labor in this country, though several versions of the law were drafted by Parliament because of civil society pressure, finally the Parliament failed in passing a really universal law, and a very weak law which does not give anybody any right to social security has been framed recently and passed by Parliament. But the struggle has not stopped. Even on the 5th of November, the civil society is going in a delegation to meet the Joint Parliamentary Committee which has been set up to look into this law, and hopefully this will also be in the coming days a major achievement of civil society in bringing total social security to all the unorganized workers of this country, and a proper right which would give them, health care, old age pension, and invalidity pension, and all those rights, nine rights that social security involves. So I think I've spoken enough. So I'd like to thank the organizers, Kilpar, especially Mr. Dakshin Murthy, and the Bangalore University Department of Law and the University Law College for giving me this opportunity to share these few thoughts with you. I hope it's been of some use. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for those enlightening words. I now request Professor T.R. Subramania to kindly deliver the presidential remarks.
Without going into the details of the talk, I thank Professor C.S. Patil, Principal, University Law College, Dharwad, as well as Madam Katyayani Chamraj for their illuminating talk. We could have had prolonged the talk, but for the time shortage, I don't think it is possible at this juncture since we have 3 more sessions to go. 1 or 2 points I just intend to make. Before the public trust doctrine was invoked and laid down by the Supreme Court of India in this country, in M.C. Mehta versus Kamal Nath, or when the issue was going on, the press actually had not played the role which it should have played. So public trust doctrine is such a doctrine wherein a responsible government minister, when he wanted to divert the course of a river, the issue came up and the press did not bother even to look into, except a few articles which had come in the newspaper. Now the second thing I just wanted to highlight about the 1, 2, 3 agreement, what we call as the nuclear agreement. 99% of the population of this country, or perhaps you can say 99.9% of the population of this country, even 50% of the people who are sitting here have no idea what exactly you mean by 123 agreement. Most of them think that there are 123 agreement. It is not 123 agreement, it is only, remember, Article 123 of the Nuclear Act. What kind of amendments are to be brought in? So where the press has played, press has actually failed in this area. It is this, in this area, it is the press which should play an important role and highlight the public. What is it like? One more thing I just wanted to, the third instance happened to be an instance which had taken place during the time of emergency. Now when you, before you enter the British House of Commons, you find a beautiful plaque, beautifully, remember, where you find the words of Lord Voltaire inscribed. The words run like this: I have greatest detest for your opinion, but I shall fight unto death to preserve your right to express your opinion. Now, during the time of emergency, a great MP, Shamim Ahmad Shamim, from Jammu and Kashmir, he openly challenged the administrators of the time. I am not taking the name of any politician. And he went to the extent of speaking in the open parliament. And he said, the famous words of Voltaire had to be amended and altered. And it should run thus. And it should be inscribed before the Indian Parliament. I have greatest detest for your opinion, but I shall fight unto death. I shall fight unto death to destroy your right to express your opinion. Where was the press at that time? Whether it has come in the press, only when the emergency was lifted, articles appeared in the newspaper. Shamim Ahmad Shamim, the MP from Jammu and Kashmir, had spoken this in the open parliament and challenged the then administration. What is important is, I just wanted to tell you, now always those who dissent are in minority. Now think of the changing trends in the international trade law. A lot of things come up, and many of these amendments, especially under the WTO system or in other matters, are not brought to the public at all. Now it is being approved by the cabinet. What kind of a legislation is it? And how many the cabinet